I've been reviewing the iPhone here on YouTube since I first started this channel 3 years ago, but I've owned and used a lot of them over the years, particularly in the earlier days. And yeah, there's no doubt that some of these updates are feeling smaller and smaller. I've been using the 16 Pro Max for just over a week now, and it's got some nice updates and great new features. Some features that are missing too, which are actually coming later on. And you've probably heard how the 16 Pro isn't that much of an upgrade over last year, but how many of you are actually upgrading your phone every year, or even every other year for that matter? Let me know down in the comments, because I think it can be really easy to forget the culmination of upgrades over 2, 3, or even 4 generations when people actually upgrade. So with that in mind, this is my review of the iPhone 16 Pro Max. What's up guys, Jack here, I'm at Tech Videos. Apple has continued with last year's design on the Pros with the brushed titanium rails that gently curve around to the display. I do still love this design, it feels really great in the hand. Once again, I did go for natural titanium. It's got a bit of like a raw industrial look to it, and it sits nicely between the black and white if you are struggling to choose between them. Desert titanium is the new colour this year, and that has more of like a golden undertone if that is more your style. We've still got the action button, a customizable button to replace the mute switch, and that has also made its way down to the regular 16s this year too. But get this, Apple has for the first time added a new button to the iPhone. It is called the camera control, and it sits just under the lock button. It's a physical button you can press to launch right into the camera with swipe gestures to change a bunch of settings, which, yeah, I do have some thoughts on that, which we'll get into later. Both the Pros are slightly taller this year with larger displays from 6.1 and 6.7 inch to now 6.3 and 6.9 inch here on the Pro Max, with noticeably thinner bezels around the edge that have gotten thinner every year since the iPhone 10, and you can really see the difference those incremental updates make over time, even with the iPhone 14 just a couple of years ago. The larger display itself doesn't really add that much content. You might get an extra line of text here and there in Safari, but it's nothing game-changing. It does feel like we might be able to fit an extra row of icons on the home screen though, as there is quite a big gap at the top and bottom that is just not being used. But the good news is the Pro Max doesn't really feel any bigger or heavier in the hand. This is already a pretty big phone, and I think that we are approaching the limits of sort of how big this thing can get without it basically becoming an iPad mini. The display still looks absolutely gorgeous for all of your apps and photos and videos, and it now goes down to a minimum of 1 nit of brightness, so when you're using your phone at night, you'll be less blinded by the display. If you like my wallpaper, by the way, it's from my new chromatic pack. It is full of these bright, vivid gradients. They look amazing on the iPhone, and I'll link to it below, and you can use code chromatic30 to get 30% off. The entire 16 lineup gets the A18 chip, with the Pros getting a Pro version of it, which has an extra 6th core on the GPU, giving it the edge if you like to do a lot of mobile gaming, and also bringing twice the performance to hardware accelerated ray tracing versus last year on the A17 Pro. Compared to last year, the A18 Pro gets up to about a 20% boost to performance overall. I can't say that I've really noticed it day to day, as these chips are already, they're pretty nuts when it comes to the performance already. For more intensive things like batch editing photos or rendering videos, if you do that sort of work on the go, then this chip will give you a boost there. The A18s also have an upgraded 16-core neural engine for running large generative AI models on device, which is going to bring Apple Intelligence to the entire lineup this year, which Apple has been making quite a lot of noise about. I'm sure you've probably heard about it. But it is not ready for launch just yet. In fact, it's only starting to roll out in America this month, with other countries to follow shortly. So I can't really talk about it yet because it's still in beta, but I did just want to review this phone as it is if you buy it today. And it did kind of feel a bit weird going to pick this up at the Apple Store, as they've got these big posters on the walls with "Hello Apple Intelligence" plastered on them, showing off that new glowing edge Siri animation. But that is not here on these phones. There's no new Siri, no rewriting tools or Genmoji, or any cleanup tools in Photos, which do look amazing, and yeah, I can't wait to actually test them out. But you shouldn't buy this on the promise of features that it doesn't have just yet. So if you are buying one in the launch window, you are going to have to wait for those new features as they start to roll out in stages over the next few months. It does kind of feel like the marketing team maybe didn't get the memo about Apple Intelligence not being ready just yet, as they're even showing it off in a few of the ads. So let's talk about the cameras, as this is something that I always look forward to with every new iPhone. I love this thing for shooting on the go and when I'm traveling, and we've got a few nice updates here. Apple's now calling the main camera the Fusion camera, which is still 48 megapixels, outputting at 24 by default, but the sensor now has a faster readout, meaning you can snap a bunch of photos in quick succession, which is even more noticeable if you're shooting with the full 48 megapixels in ProRAW. There's also a new, more efficient ProRAW format in settings with JPEG XL lossless or lossy, which take up around 46 or 28 megabytes per 48 megapixel shot, down from 75 megabytes on the 15 Pro, which wasn't really very workable, as after like 12 shots you've used a gig of storage. JPEG XL still retains all of that dynamic range, but in much smaller file sizes. The only downside is it is not quite supported everywhere just yet. Apple supports it from iOS 17 and macOS 14 and later, and Adobe supports it, but Google Chrome doesn't right now. But the thing that I've been having the most fun with is in video mode. The Fusion camera can now capture 120 frames per second in 4K resolution with high dynamic range. And the footage from this, it just looks nuts. You can slow the footage down to a quarter of the speed and man, it just looks so much sharper in 4K. Like, check out this butterfly just chilling on the leaf with the slow-mo waterfall in the background. I was honestly blown away by just how good some of these clips look. It's hard to believe that they're even shot on a phone. There's new retiming tools in the Photos app for changing the speed of the entire clip, or you can still do the speed ramp as before. As you'd expect, these files are pretty big. Around 15 seconds of footage comes in at 260 megabytes. And that's before we even get into Apple Log. You'll need to attach an SSD for that. And these were already massive before, but at 120 FPS, 15 seconds comes in at over 4.6 gigs. So be prepared with some external storage. Regardless of Apple Log, shooting in the new slow-mo did put the chip to work. The phone did heat up to the point where it started telling me that it needed to cool down. It never actually stopped me from recording though, but stills did take a little bit longer to take. But it was kind of hot in here and humid in the greenhouse, as that is just what the butterflies need, which, yeah, definitely didn't help. But if this camera and sensor can handle that much data in 4K, then surely it could handle 8K 30, right? I mean, I'd love to see it. Over on the ultra-wide, that also now has a 48 megapixel sensor for capturing big, sweeping, high-res vistas, or getting super up close for some macro shots, which I love. It brings a whole new perspective to the world. But there is a caveat. Remember how when the 14 Pro got its first 48 megapixel sensor, but binned down to 12 by default? Well, that is what's happening here on the ultra-wide. I was kind of hoping it would shoot at 24 megapixels like the Fusion camera, but no, your only option here is to switch over to ProRAW and use the full resolution, or you're going to be stuck at 12 megapixels. If history is anything to go by, then I imagine next year the ultra-wide will also capture at 24 megapixels by default, but I was kind of hoping we could just skip straight to that step. That said, the ProRAW shots are really impressive. There is so much more detail here than before. I do love a good macro shot, but that does leave the telephoto camera looking a little bit lonely. While the 5X is now on both the Pro and Pro Max models, it does still remain at 12 megapixels. And I actually loved shooting with this on the 15 Pro Max. It gives you a lot of reach for those distant subjects, and across all three cameras, that gives you a lot of flexibility when shooting. I do find myself using the 2X crop the most. I love that focal length. So personally, I do kind of wish that we could get a dedicated fourth camera at a 50-ish millimeter focal length. But two of the biggest new camera changes come with new ways to capture photos and new ways to edit them. The new camera control is on all of the 16s, and this sits just under the lock button, and this is both pressure and gesture sensitive. So a full click from anywhere in iOS pops open the camera with this really nice animation, like it's jumping out from the button. You can set this to a third-party camera app as well if they've added support for it. And they also said that with an update, the camera control will launch the new visual intelligence feature that will get you details about a restaurant or tell you about a breed of dog like Google Lens. But again, that is coming later down the line. It is not here at launch. Then in the camera, a full click takes a photo, or you can hold it to instantly start recording with quick take. which has had a big update. I never used this before because it only recorded in like a weird 4:3 aspect ratio in HD only at 30 FPS. Now it immediately switches to 16:9, capturing 4K 60 in HDR, making it much easier to grab a quick clip at the best video quality. The button does feel pretty natural in use, but I mean, after 17 years of tapping the screen, I did kind of forget to use it at first. It definitely feels better than the volume buttons, which are a lot firmer to press, but even with the camera control, it can cause you to move the phone slightly when shooting. So I'd say for those super up close macro shots, you are still better off just tapping the screen. And you can customize the pressure sensitivity in the accessibility settings. So I definitely recommend having a play around in here so you can find what works for you. It does sit quite far along on the side of the phone. You do end up like blocking the corner of the screen with your fingers, but not the viewfinder, which, you know, is the important bit. But I think the reason it's placed here is to make it usable in portrait as it sits right where my thumb is, so I can just whip my phone out my pocket and take a quick snap. Then we've got the gestures. So with a light press, you'll bring up a menu with the current control, like zoom, where you can then swipe to zoom in or out through the different cameras, or a double light press lets you change to a different control. We've got exposure control, depth for changing the bokeh blur, zoom as we just saw, but I actually prefer cameras as this lets you switch between each of the actual lenses, which I just find way more precise, as I don't really want to take any photos at like a weird 3.6x crop. But I have found myself accidentally sliding through settings or changing a setting when I actually meant to take a photo instead. I do love the physical button, but yeah, I do think that the gestures can be a little bit finicky. A bit of a tip, if you are having trouble, then try flipping the whole thing over and using it upside down, as you might find it easier to press the camera control and do the swipe gestures with your thumb. Sometimes, to be honest though, I do find it quicker to just tap the screen than navigate through the menu. So I find it works best when you just like stick to one or two settings. And for me, that has been the new styles and tone control. These have been standout features for me. These are part of the next-gen Photographic Styles on the 16 Pro, and Apple has completely revamped it this year. There's a lot more presets you can swipe between to give your images a certain look or mood, which you can see as a live preview in the viewfinder as you shoot. But now there's this new control pad at the bottom where you can adjust the tone and color. And this isn't just applying a filter to the entire image. These adjustments begin deeper into the image pipeline. And they understand things like skin tones, with certain styles only adjusting certain colors. The tone specifically is one that I think a lot of people are going to like, as for the past few years, smartphones in general have been getting pretty aggressive with their HDR treatment, often just flattening images out entirely, taking out all of the soul and contrast and making them look like phone photos. The tone adjustment lets you bring some of that contrast back in and dial it in just as you want it, even on the standard style if you don't want any of those more stylized looks. Then what's more, you can set whatever style you've made as your new preset and shoot with that going forward. But at any time you can always revert the image back or apply a different style entirely. It saves some extra data along with the photos that increases file sizes a little bit, but it gives you that flexibility, so I think it's a decent trade-off. I have got a trip coming up soon and I can't wait to shoot with this in some different, more sunnier lighting, as yeah, it is a bit drab in England this time of year. With battery life, Apple has bumped up the capacities across all of the iPhone 16s by about 5 to 9%, and they said the Pro Max this year has the best iPhone battery life ever. And I can say that it does feel like I am getting a little bit more from it, but I wouldn't say it's anything dramatic. I've been getting about 6 to 7 hours screen on time with battery life to spare, but incrementally, Apple has been increasing battery life the last few generations. So I think if you are upgrading from an older phone, then you'll definitely appreciate that. I do still carry a power bank just in case for a top up, and lately I've been using the new Anker MagGo Slim with Qi 2, and I'll link to my video on that if you want to check it out. What's more apparent though is the faster MagSafe charging. The 16s have gone from 15 to 25 watt wireless if you get Apple's updated MagSafe charger, which now comes with a braided cable and in both 1 or 2 meters for plugging in under a bed or a bedside table. And that now gets you to 50% in around 30 minutes. If Apple still did S generation phones like the iPhone 5 to the 5S, then I'd say the 16 Pro does feel a bit like a 15S Pro, with the design refinements, slightly larger screen and battery life, new photographic styles and the camera control, which I do love. I just wish that we could tweak the gesture sensitivity. That would make any spurious inputs less likely. But really, it does feel like the most significant update is going to come with Apple Intelligence over the next few weeks and months. And the majority of those features are also going to be coming to the iPhone 15 Pro as well. So I don't think that you need to run out and get the new Pro unless you are a techie like me. I put out a poll on the community tab, and a lot of you said that you're on a 2-year cycle, but most of you said every 4 years or more, which I think is a lot more representative of how most people treat their phones. These things are a big spend. So to upgrade from a 4-year-old 12 Pro Max, that would be a massive jump. You're getting a 4-generation leap with the A18 Pro chip, USB-C like the rest of the tech world, 48 megapixels on the main and ultra-wide cameras, ProRes video, the dynamic island, 120Hz refresh rate and always on display, a much brighter display outdoors, to name a few, and then safety features like car crash detection and emergency SOS via satellite. A lot of updates that accumulate over time that are easy to forget with the yearly cycle of new phones. You've got to look at the bigger picture, especially when so many people are on 3 or 4 year cycles. But yeah, I am a techie YouTuber. It's kind of my job to test this thing out. And I have no regrets upgrading, especially for the new camera stuff with the faster sensor and the new photographic styles. And I can't wait to shoot with this some more. But let me know down in the comments if you're planning to upgrade and what your favorite new feature is. Get subscribed if you want to see the Apple Intelligence features. I definitely do want to revisit this review once the AI stuff is actually here. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.